Chapter 1. The Man Who Built Everything. Christopher Foley stood in the shadow of the Meridian Tower, his latest architectural achievement piercing the Chicago skyline. At 38, he'd transformed from a scholarship kid from Detroit into one of the city's most sought-after commercial architects. His firm, Foley Design Group, had earned him wealth, respect, and a reputation for turning impossible projects into landmarks. He checked his watch. The Phoenix deal had closed faster than expected, a $200 million mixed-use development that would have kept him in Arizona another week. But something gnawed at him. Meredith's voice on their last call had carried a strange lightness, almost relief when he'd mentioned the extended timeline. "I'll miss you, Chris, but take your time," she'd said. Take your time. His wife of 7 years had never encouraged his absence before. Christopher had built his success on instinct, on reading what people didn't say. And right now, every cell in his body screamed that something was wrong at home. He'd met Meredith Cunningham at a gallery opening 8 years ago. She'd been stunning, tall, elegant, with an MBA from Northwestern and a trust fund she'd pretended didn't matter. Her family had old money, the kind that whispered rather than shouted. Her father, Bill Cunningham, ran a private equity firm. Her mother, Christine, sat on charity boards and judged everyone beneath her tax bracket. The Cunninghams had tolerated Christopher, barely. He wasn't their kind. No country club memberships, no legacy admissions. Just raw talent and relentless drive. Meredith had sworn it didn't matter, that she'd chosen him precisely because he'd built himself. Now, as Christopher's private car cut through Monday morning traffic toward their Lincoln Park brownstone, he wondered if he'd been a convenient rebellion that had lost its appeal. The house was dark when he entered through the side door, his key turning silently. He'd texted his arrival time to Meredith, but gotten no response. It was 7 a.m. She should be awake, preparing for her role as director of the Cunningham Foundation, the family's charitable vanity project. Then he heard it, movement in the kitchen, the espresso machine hissing. Christopher moved quietly down the hallway, his architect's mind automatically noting the details. Fresh flowers in the vase. Meredith hated flowers. Men's cologne lingering in the air, not his brand. And a woman's laugh from the kitchen that wasn't his wife's. Chapter 2. The Sister's Confession. Bridget Cunningham stood at his kitchen island, wearing Meredith's silk robe, the ivory one he'd bought for their anniversary. Her auburn hair was damp, and she looked entirely too comfortable in his home. "Christopher," she smiled, pouring coffee into 2 cups. "You're early." He stood in the doorway, his overnight bag still in his hand, processing the scene. Bridget was Meredith's younger sister by 3 years, a marketing executive with a reputation for getting what she wanted. They'd never been close. Christopher had always sensed something calculating behind her practiced charm. "Where's Meredith?" His voice was steady, but his mind was already racing through possibilities, discarding the innocent ones. Bridget's smile widened as she walked toward him, carrying the coffee. She moved like someone who'd won a prize. "She asked me to be here. To comfort you." "Comfort me from what?" "She's with Patrick." Bridget handed him a cup, her fingers brushing his deliberately. "Patrick Freeman. They've been planning this for months. Right now, they're in Cabo San Lucas." She called it a honeymoon. The word landed like a physical blow, but Christopher's expression never changed. Years of negotiating million-dollar deals had taught him to control his reactions. "How long have you known?" "Does it matter?" Bridget set down her cup and stepped closer. "Meredith's made her choice. You're free now. Free to make better choices." Her hand reached for his shirt. "Take off your clothes, Christopher. Shall we begin?" Christopher grabbed her wrist, not hard but firm enough to stop her. "Tell me everything. Now." Something flickered in Bridget's eyes, surprise, maybe disappointment. She'd expected him to crumble or rage or fall into her arms. Instead, he stood there like granite, waiting. "Patrick Freeman. Trust fund baby. Family owns a chain of luxury car dealerships. They met at the spring gala 6 months ago." Bridget pulled free, her seductive mask slipping. "Meredith was bored, Christopher. You were always working, always building something." Patrick offered excitement. "Money without the effort. And you? What's your role in this?" Bridget's laugh was bitter. "Meredith and I made a deal. She gets Patrick and his lifestyle. I get you, and half of what she walks away with. She thinks you'll be devastated, easy to manipulate in the divorce. And I." She trailed her finger down his chest. "I've always wanted what she had." Christopher stepped back, his mind already working. This wasn't just an affair. This was calculated, planned, with his wife and her sister conspiring to destroy him and profit from the rubble. When does she come back? 2 weeks. She wanted to make sure you'd be. Bridget searched for the word, receptive to her terms. Broken enough to give her whatever she wants. Christopher set down the coffee, untouched. Get out of my house. Christopher. Now. Bridget's mask cracked entirely. You'll regret this. Meredith has lawyers ready. Her family's lawyers. You'll lose everything. Christopher smiled then, a cold expression that never reached his eyes. I don't lose, Bridget. I build. And sometimes I demolish. Tell Meredith I'll be waiting. Chapter 3. The Blueprint of Revenge. After Bridget left, Christopher stood in his living room for exactly 3 minutes, allowing himself to feel everything: rage, betrayal, humiliation. Then he locked it all away in a compartment of his mind and began to think. He'd built a fortune by seeing what others missed, by understanding that every structure needed the right foundation. Demolition was just construction in reverse. You didn't start with the walls, you started with the supports. Christopher pulled out his laptop and began mapping out what he knew, what he needed to discover, and how to use both. First call. Tyler Brandt, his oldest friend and the private investigator who'd helped him vet contractors for sensitive projects. Tyler, I need everything on Patrick Freeman. Family, business, debts, secrets, everything. How deep? Basement level. And Tyler, I need it yesterday. Second call. His lawyer, Abel Barker, a cutthroat divorce attorney who'd earned his reputation destroying prenuptial agreements. Abel, hypothetical. Spouse is having an affair, planning divorce, has family money and lawyers. What's the play? Abel's laugh was knowing. Christopher, hypotheticals don't come with this kind of urgency. Let me guess, Meredith. Hypothetically, you document everything, you protect your assets immediately, and you strike before they do. The Cunninghams play dirty. Old money always does. You need leverage, something that makes them settle fast and quiet. Christopher ended the call and moved to the safe in his study. Inside was the original prenuptial agreement he'd insisted on despite Meredith's protests. Bill Cunningham had actually smiled at that, one of the few times he'd shown Christopher respect. The prenup protected Christopher's firm and his pre-marriage assets. But Meredith would still claim half of their marital property and his earnings during the marriage, unless she'd violated the infidelity clause. Christopher pulled out his phone and began scrolling through bank statements, credit card charges, looking for evidence. Then he stopped. He was thinking like a victim, gathering proof for lawyers. That wasn't how you won. You didn't just survive a betrayal like this. You made damn sure it never happened again to anyone. His phone buzzed. Tyler, already. Chris, preliminary search on Freeman. Guy's a mess. 3 failed businesses, gambling debts he's hiding from his family, and get this. He's been engaged twice in the past 2 years. Both times, the engagement broke off right after he got money out of the relationship. Christopher's mind began connecting pieces. He's a con artist. Sophisticated one. Targets wealthy women, romances them, gets financial entanglement, then disappears with whatever he can grab. Your wife isn't his future, she's his score. And Bridget. Sister's been in and out of therapy for years. Sibling rivalry issues, history of trying to steal Meredith's boyfriends. Hospital stay for mental health 3 years ago after a breakdown. The Cunninghams buried it deep, but I found the paperwork. Christopher leaned back in his chair. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a conspiracy of broken people, and they'd underestimated him completely. They thought they were playing him. They had no idea they'd just walked into the kill zone of a man who spent his life understanding how structures failed. Time to build his masterpiece. Chapter 4. Digging the Foundation. Over the next 3 days, Christopher became a ghost in his own life. He went through the motions at the office while constructing an elaborate trap in the shadows. Tyler's investigation deepened, unearthing details that painted Patrick Freeman not as a romantic rival, but as a predator. Freeman's pattern was consistent. Meet wealthy women at high society events. Pursue them with expensive gestures, funded by credit cards he'd soon default on. Create romantic entanglements, then extract money through various schemes before disappearing. His family's car dealership money was real, but Patrick had been cut off years ago after embezzling from his own father. He's about to run. Tyler said during their meeting at a coffee shop far from Christopher's usual haunts. His debts are coming due. I estimate he needs at least 200 grand immediately, or some dangerous people start collecting fingers. Christopher stirred his coffee. What's his play with Meredith? Near as I can figure, he's got her convinced they're running away together. Fresh start, new life. What he's actually doing is positioning her to liquidate assets, probably telling her she needs to grab everything she can from you in the divorce, consolidate it, and then they'll disappear. Except he'll disappear with her money, and she'll be left holding the bag for whatever financial crimes he talks her into committing along the way. And Bridget's role? Tyler slid a folder across the table. Sister Dearest is in debt. Her marketing firm's failing. She's got a gambling problem. Online poker. High stakes. The Cunninghams don't know. Meredith's been covering for her, but there's a limit. Bridget needs money desperately. I think the deal was that she'd seduce you, make you vulnerable, maybe even get pregnant, lock in long-term payments. Then both sisters profit from destroying you. Christopher opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, casino records, therapy notes Tyler had somehow acquired. The pieces were all there. They're not just betraying me. They're drowning, and they decided to use me as a life raft. More like a piggy bank they plan to shatter, Tyler corrected. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Christopher closed the folder. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, and then I'm going to watch them destroy themselves with it. That evening, Christopher did something he'd never done. He visited Bill Cunningham's office unannounced. The patriarch of the Cunningham family sat behind a mahogany desk in a corner office overlooking Lake Michigan, his expression shifting from surprise to calculated interest when Christopher walked in. Christopher, this is unexpected. We need to talk about your daughters, Bill. The older man's eyes narrowed. If this is about Meredith's affair, I suggest. You know? Bill's silence was answer enough. Of course he knew. The Cunninghams always knew, and they always calculated the angles. Meredith's happiness is. She's being conned, Christopher interrupted. Patrick Freeman is running a sophisticated romance scam. He's not in love with your daughter. He's positioning her to commit financial crimes that will destroy your family's reputation while he walks away with whatever money he can extract. Christopher laid out the evidence, watching Bill's face harden with each revelation. When he finished, the older man sat back in his chair. What do you want? I want you to stay out of my way. What's about to happen isn't pretty, but it's necessary. Your daughters conspired to destroy me. I'm going to let them destroy themselves instead. But I need to know you won't interfere when it gets ugly. Bill studied Christopher for a long moment. You've always been smarter than I gave you credit for. I opposed Meredith marrying you because I thought you were too hungry, too driven. I was wrong. You're exactly like me. He stood, extending his hand. Do what you need to do. But when it's over, the Cunningham name doesn't get dragged through the mud. Whatever happens, it happens quietly. Christopher shook his hand. Agreed. Chapter 5, Setting the Charges. Christopher spent the next week becoming someone he barely recognized. Every action was calculated. Every word a move on a chessboard where his opponents didn't even know they were playing. He hired a second private investigator, Daryl Kelly, to follow Patrick Freeman. The reports came back like clockwork. Freeman meeting with a loan shark named Eddie Swanson. Freeman visiting storage units where he'd stashed items stolen from previous marks. Freeman shopping for fake passports. But Christopher's real stroke of genius came from an unexpected source, Meredith's email. She'd left her laptop at home, and he still knew her passwords. She'd never changed them because she'd never thought he'd look. Inside, he found everything. Emails between Meredith and Patrick detailing their plans, messages to divorce lawyers, even a draft settlement proposal that would have given her 70% of their assets by claiming Christopher's work kept him absent and emotionally unavailable. There were also emails between Meredith and Bridget, laying out their scheme in detail. Bridget was supposed to seduce Christopher, document it somehow, and then use it as leverage for an even more favorable divorce settlement. The pregnancy idea had been there too, discussed casually like a business strategy. Christopher copied everything to an encrypted drive. Then he did something that would seem insane to anyone who didn't understand the game. He began helping them. He transferred money from their joint account to Meredith's personal account, $50,000. In the transaction notes, he wrote, "For your new beginning. I understand now." He knew she'd see it, knew she'd think he was broken, accepting his fate. He texted Bridget, I'm sorry I pushed you away. Can we talk? She responded within minutes, eager to resume her role in the plan. To everyone watching, Christopher Foley was falling apart. He stopped going to the office regularly. He let his appearance slip slightly, nothing dramatic, just enough to suggest a man unraveling. His partners began to worry. Only Tyler and Abel knew the truth. They watched Christopher orchestrate his masterpiece with something close to awe. You're betting everything on this, Abel warned during a late-night strategy session. If one piece doesn't fall right. Every building I design has a keystone, Christopher interrupted. One critical support that holds everything together. Remove it, and the structure collapses exactly as planned. I know where the keystone is. And that is? Christopher smiled. Patrick's greed. He can't help himself. When he sees an opportunity to score bigger than he planned, he'll take it. And that's when everything falls apart for all of them. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. 10 days after Bridget's revelation, Christopher made his boldest move. He called Patrick Freeman directly. Mr. Freeman, this is Christopher Foley. I think we should meet. The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds. I don't think that's a good idea. I disagree. I have a business proposition. One that benefits both of us significantly. What kind of proposition? Christopher pitched his voice perfectly, defeated but pragmatic. The kind where we all get what we want without lawyers bleeding us dry for years. Meet me at the signature room. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Come alone. The next evening, Christopher arrived at the restaurant on the 95th floor of the John Hancock Center 30 minutes early. He'd chosen the location deliberately, public enough that Freeman would feel safe, private enough for honest conversation, and expensive enough to appeal to the man's pretensions. Patrick Freeman arrived exactly on time. He was 42 but dressed 25, all designer labels and expensive cologne. Handsome in a practiced way, with the kind of smile that had probably charmed dozens of women before Meredith. Mr. Foley. Freeman extended his hand. Christopher took it, cataloging the weak grip, the nervous energy. Sit. Let's talk like businessmen. Over drinks Christopher barely touched, and Freeman finished quickly. Christopher laid out his proposition. I know about you and Meredith. I know about the plan. The divorce, the asset split, all of it. Freeman started to protest, but Christopher raised his hand. Let me finish. I'm not angry. Actually, I'm grateful. Meredith and I haven't been happy for years. You've done me a favor. He leaned forward. Here's what I'm offering. I'll give her the divorce. No contest, generous settlement. But I need something from you. What? Take Bridget off my back. She's been persistent. Convince her I'm not interested. In return, I make this easy for everyone. Meredith gets her settlement, you get Meredith, and I get to move on with my life. Clean, simple, quiet. Freeman's eyes narrowed, calculating. What's the catch? No catch. I just want this over with. My reputation intact, no public scandal. You and Meredith ride off into the sunset, and I rebuild. Everyone wins. Christopher could see the wheels turning in Freeman's head. The con man was trying to figure out the angle, but Christopher had given him exactly what predators couldn't resist, an easy mark who thought he was being clever. What about the money? Freeman asked carefully. Meredith mentioned your worth. 10 million, give or take. She'll get 5 in the settlement. More than fair, and it avoids a lengthy court battle. Christopher paused. Of course, I'll need a few weeks to liquidate some assets properly. Can't just pull 5 million out of thin air without tanking investments. Freeman's eyes lit up. 5 million. More than he'd probably seen in his entire life. That's reasonable. Good. Then we have an understanding. Christopher stood, leaving cash for the drinks. One more thing. Meredith returns in 3 days. Let's keep this conversation between us. She'll be more cooperative if she thinks she's still in control. After Freeman left, Christopher sat back down and pulled out his phone. Tyler had been listening to the entire conversation through a bug in Christopher's shirt collar. You get all that? Every word. He's already texting someone, probably his loan shark. He's planning to grab the money and run. Just like you predicted. Perfect. Time for phase 2. The next morning, Christopher sent a message to Bridget. You were right. I can't stop thinking about you. Come to the house tonight. 9 p.m. Come alone. Then he texted Meredith. I know you're coming back early. We need to talk. Please come home tonight. I want to understand. And finally, he called Patrick Freeman. Change of plans. Meredith's coming back early. Let's accelerate our timeline. Come to my house tonight at 9 p.m. We'll finalize everything, and I'll have the paperwork ready. Christopher had just invited all 3 conspirators to his home at the same time, and none of them knew about the others. Chapter 7. The Convergence. Meredith Cunningham Foley arrived at 8:30 p.m., 30 minutes early, which told Christopher everything he needed to know about her state of mind. She was anxious, ready to seize control of the narrative before Christopher could mount a defense. She looked tanned and rested, dressed in designer casual, the outfit of someone who'd just returned from paradise and was ready for battle. Christopher. She walked into the living room like she still owned it. In her mind, she probably did. Meredith. How was Cabo? Her mask slipped for just a second. How did you? Bridget told me. Interesting choice, sending your sister to seduce me while you were on your honeymoon with another man. Meredith's shock gave way to something uglier, calculation. If you know, then there's no point in pretending. I want a divorce. I've already consulted with lawyers. You'll receive papers tomorrow. I see. And Patrick? Is he part of this conversation, or are you handling this solo? Patrick is none of your business. Christopher checked his watch. 8:45. Actually, he'll be here in 15 minutes. I invited him. We had drinks yesterday. Nice guy. Told me all about his previous engagements. Did he mention those? The color drained from Meredith's face. You're lying. Am I? Or are you just realizing you might not know him as well as you thought? Christopher walked to the bar and poured himself whiskey. But don't worry. Bridget will be here too. She'll be thrilled to see you. Unless she's too busy trying to get me into bed again. What are you doing, Christopher? What I do best. Demonstrating structural failure. He took a sip. See, you built your plan on assumptions. You assumed I'd be devastated, cooperative, easy to manipulate. You assumed Patrick was exactly what he claimed to be. You assumed Bridget's loyalty was yours. Bad assumptions make for catastrophic failures. The doorbell rang. Christopher smiled. That would be your sister. Shall we? Bridget walked in wearing a dress that would have been more appropriate for a nightclub, her face falling when she saw Meredith. What is she doing here? Family reunion, Christopher said. Have a seat. We're waiting for one more. The sisters stared at each other with pure hatred. Whatever pretense of alliance they'd maintained was gone, replaced by the poisonous dynamic that had probably defined their relationship for decades. You told him, Meredith accused. You were supposed to wait, Bridget shot back. The plan was that you'd seduce my husband, not fall for him yourself. Fall for him? Bridget laughed bitterly. This was always about the money. You were supposed to share. The doorbell rang again. Christopher opened it to reveal Patrick Freeman, dressed expensively and carrying a bottle of wine like he was arriving at a dinner party. His smile died when he saw the 2 women. What is this? Patrick's charming mask cracked immediately. This, Christopher closed and locked the door behind him, is a come-to-Jesus moment. Everyone, sit down. For the next 10 minutes, Christopher played the recordings Tyler had made. Patrick's meetings with loan sharks. His previous cons. His real financial situation. Then he played the recordings from his meeting with Patrick, where Freeman had agreed to take Christopher's money and presumably run. Then came the emails between Meredith and Bridget, laying out their entire scheme. The plan to seduce Christopher. The pregnancy contingency. The asset liquidation strategy. And finally, the evidence Christopher had gathered of Patrick and Bridget's separate communications. Messages where Patrick had promised Bridget he'd leave Meredith once he had the money. Messages where Bridget had promised Patrick that Christopher's firm was worth far more than $10 million, and if they played it right, they could get it all. The 3 conspirators turned on each other like wolves in a trap. You were going to leave me? Meredith stood, her voice shaking. You were working with him? Bridget looked at Patrick with pure betrayal. Patrick, to his credit, tried to salvage it. This is all taken out of context. Christopher's manipulating. Christopher's fist caught him in the jaw, a clean right hook that sent Patrick sprawling. Years of stress, betrayal, and rage compressed into one perfect moment of violence. That, Christopher said, shaking out his hand, was for insulting my intelligence. Chapter 8. The Unraveling. Patrick touched his bleeding lip, shock replacing his smooth facade. You hit me. I'll press charges. You'll do nothing. Christopher stood over him. You're going to sit there and listen, because what happens next determines whether you leave here in an ambulance or in handcuffs. Christopher pulled out a tablet and began displaying documents. Patrick Freeman, real name Patrick Finnegan. Changed it 8 years ago after your first fraud conviction in Nevada. You've been running romance scams across 3 states. The statute of limitations hasn't run out on at least 4 of them. He scrolled through more documents. I've also compiled evidence of your current debts to some very dangerous people. Eddie Swanson, for example. I wonder what he'd pay for your exact location. Patrick's face went white. Meredith. Christopher turned to his wife. Did you know Patrick convinced you to transfer funds from the Cunningham Foundation into a personal account? That account was supposed to be for investment opportunities he'd identified. Except there were no investments. Just a sophisticated money laundering scheme. Your signatures are all over the paperwork. Meredith's voice was barely a whisper. No, you were going to commit fraud against your own family's charity. Congratulations. That's federal charges, minimum 5 years. And since the account's in your name, you'd be the one going to prison while Patrick disappeared. And me? Bridget's voice was defiant, but Christopher could hear the fear underneath. You, Bridget, were going to help him do it. Your communications made you an accessory. Plus, there's the small matter of the $50,000 you've been embezzling from your own marketing firm to cover your gambling debts. Your business partner, Mohammed Cameron, has been suspicious for months. I've sent him everything he needs to file charges. Christopher sat down, facing the 3 of them. They looked like what they were. Small, desperate people who tried to take down someone bigger and failed spectacularly. Here's what's going to happen, Christopher said calmly. Patrick, you're going to leave Chicago tonight. You're going to disappear, pay back Eddie Swanson with whatever money you have left, and you're never going to contact any of us again. In return, I don't send your information to the FBI or to the other loan sharks who'd love to know where you are. Patrick nodded quickly, pathetically eager to escape. Meredith, you're going to sign divorce papers that give me everything. The house, the cars, the investments, all of it. You'll walk away with exactly what you brought into this marriage, your trust fund. In return, I don't press charges for the foundation fraud or expose what you tried to do. Your family's reputation stays intact. Meredith's eyes filled with tears, but Christopher felt nothing. She'd gambled with his life and lost. And Bridget. Christopher saved her for last. You're going to confess to your business partner, pay back what you stole, and you're going to get help for your gambling addiction. You're also going to stay away from my life permanently. In return, I don't tell your parents everything you've done. You can't do this, Bridget said weakly. I already have. Your father knows enough to be disappointed. He doesn't need to know how deep you've fallen. Christopher stood. Now all of you get out of my house. You have 24 hours to comply with everything I've outlined. After that, every piece of evidence I have goes to the appropriate authorities. Patrick left first, practically running. Bridget followed, her defiance crumbling into tears. Meredith lingered, standing in the doorway of the home they'd shared. I did love you once, she said quietly. Christopher looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. No, you didn't. You loved the idea of rebellion, of marrying someone your parents didn't approve of. When that got boring, you went looking for the next excitement. You never loved me, Meredith. You loved what I represented. She left without another word. Chapter 9, Reconstruction. 3 months later, Christopher stood in the same spot where he'd confronted his betrayers, but the house felt different now. He'd had it completely remodeled. New furniture, new colors, new everything. Every trace of Meredith erased and replaced with something authentically his. The divorce had been finalized quietly, exactly as Christopher dictated. Meredith had signed everything, taking only her trust fund and disappearing to her parents' vacation home in the Hamptons. Bill Cunningham had called once, a brief conversation that consisted entirely of, "You kept your word." The name stayed clean. "Thank you." Patrick Freeman had vanished completely. Tyler's last report placed him somewhere in South America, still running from debts and warrants. He'd never get the chance to victimize anyone else. Every law enforcement agency in the country had his information now. Bridget had checked into a rehabilitation facility for gambling addiction. Her business partner had agreed not to press charges in exchange for full restitution and her resignation. She'd sent Christopher one letter, which he'd burned without reading. Christopher's firm had thrived in the aftermath. Freed from the emotional weight of his failing marriage, he designed his best work yet, a sustainable housing project that was winning awards before it was even completed. His partners had noticed the change in him, sharper, more focused, unburdened. Tyler visited on a Friday evening, carrying beer and takeout. "You know," he said, settling into Christopher's new couch. "When you first called me, I thought you'd want to destroy them. Financially, legally, publicly. But what you did was worse in a way." "How so?" "You made them destroy themselves." Patrick's running for the rest of his life. Meredith lost everything she wanted. The money, the man, the respect of her family. Bridget's facing her demons alone. You didn't just beat them. You forced them to face who they really were. Christopher opened his beer. "I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice. And I wanted to make sure they couldn't hurt anyone else the way they tried to hurt me." Mission accomplished. Tyler raised his bottle. To Christopher Foley, the architect who built the perfect trap. They drank, and Christopher allowed himself to smile. Not because he'd won. Victory over people like that wasn't particularly meaningful. But because he'd survived, rebuilt, and come out stronger. His phone buzzed. A text from Abel. "New client wants to meet you. Brilliant architect, recently divorced, wants to design her dream house." Interested, Christopher looked around his remodeled home, his blank canvas. He'd torn down the old structure and built something better. Maybe it was time to help someone else do the same. He texted back, "Send me her information." Outside, Chicago glowed in the twilight. All steel and glass, an endless possibility. Christopher had learned the hardest lesson architecture could teach. Sometimes you had to demolish everything to build something worth keeping. And sometimes, the best revenge wasn't destruction at all. It was building a better life while your enemies watched from the rubble of their own making. The doorbell rang. Christopher opened it to find a delivery person holding a small package. Inside was a simple card from Bill Cunningham. It read, "You were right about everything. I should have seen it sooner. Thank you for handling it with discretion. If you ever need anything, you know where to find me." Christopher smiled and tossed the card into his new fireplace, watching it burn. He didn't need anything from the Cunninghams. He'd taken everything of value from that family. Not their money, not their connections, but the lesson that some structures are built on rotten foundations. And rotten foundations always collapse. It's just physics. Christopher returned to his drafting table, where the preliminary sketches for his next project waited. A community center for Detroit, the city that had made him. A structure built not for profit or prestige, but for purpose. He picked up his pencil and began to draw, each line precise and deliberate. Because that's what architects do. They take empty space and fill it with something that matters. They build. And Christopher Foley was very, very good at building. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.